Greetings and salutations, all you beautiful people, and welcome to another episode of Art of the Beholder, a show dedicated to all things eclectic in the world of art. I'm your host, Novo Day, and today we're going to be talking about art and painting and multimedia by sitting down with artist Gretchen Andrew. Miss Andrew's work hacks systems of power with art, code, and glitter. Trained in classical oil painting through a 5-year apprenticeship with Billy Childish, she merges traditional techniques with technologies including AI, search engine manipulation, and robotics. Her Facetune portrait series, which critiques digitally enforced ideals of beauty, was acquired by the Whitney Museum of American Art in 2025. Other collections include exhibitions at the 21C Museum Hotel, RFC Art Collection, Francisco Lens, and the Monterey Museum of Art. Her work has also been featured at the Tate Modern, V&A Museum, and the National Gallery X, and the Photographers Gallery in London. And today, guys, we have the pleasure of sitting down to talk shop. So please give a warm welcome to Miss Gretchen Andrew. Gretchen, welcome to the show.
Hi, Novo. Thank you so much for having me.
You are very, very welcome. We are very excited about this show for a number of reasons, and I'm actually really excited to talk about the Facetune portraits. I have to tell you. But before we do, I always like to give our listeners a little bit of a background on our guests, our subjects, all of the above. So first, for the good people that don't know, I gave a little bit of your background in the intro, but I want to know more. Tell us more about yourself. How do we get here today?
Yeah, so I'm really passionate about making technology visible so that it can be better understood and we can take a little bit more power back as consumers of it, as citizens in society, and especially as artists, really using art as a way to have conversations culturally about what is happening with technology. So my background is I studied information systems. I worked in
Yeah, you were
tech
working at
very
Google
briefly.
for a while, right?
Yeah. Well, we're not going to call it a while. I lasted a solid 18 months.
Well, that's a
And
while, Gretchen. That's a while. My first
yeah,
job was about 18, or career job was about 18 months. So yeah, that sounds right. Clearly, we're already a technologist before you were an artist, right?
well, I was only a technologist, but
Okay,
I was
only.
seeing, yeah, I had no skills. I knew nobody in the art world. I was seeing technology used primarily to manipulate our attention, sell us stuff we don't need.
Mm.
And I just saw it as a tool of transformation, of positive growth, of really feeling like it could be used for the better. And I was, sort of being used for somewhere between mediocre and evil.
Oh my God, digital
And
exhaust. They know what to sell you before
yeah,
you do. Yeah, what's so yeah, tell us paint us that picture. Tell us the story of your journey and let's create that bridge. How do we go from working at Google technologist to becoming a full-time artist, like who inspired you along the way? What made you go, man, I want to do this? And how do we get to the other side?
well, really, I decided that if I'm unhappy in this job, which is supposedly a very good job,
Hmm.
maybe jobs are not for me. And maybe I can use these tools, this technology that I believe in to make myself into something I do want to be.
What did you want to be at the time?
Well, I had a short list, but if I had picked anything else, it wouldn't have worked out. I almost posed it as a challenge to technology. Can you transform me into a successful artist? In that, it was almost a performative art piece, but also there was some protection in that. I didn't need to believe in myself as much as I needed to believe in the technology, in that possibility. I decided, without knowing very much, that an artist is someone who gets to be celebrated for being themselves, and professional artists get to be paid and celebrated for being themselves. And so, with that job description in mind, I set out on a course of learning originally from YouTube videos and MoMA online and Stanford online, and eventually made my way to some mentors who really helped me see what I was doing wrong. And in all of that was grappling with learning to paint, learning very classical techniques, and then also being this tech kid who had posed my whole artistic career as a challenge to technology, about transformation, about tech visibility, about being in opposition to the art world or in opposition to the tech world. And so there have been moments in which the painting career and the tech career were further apart and more conjoined. But then recently, things have really come together in a way that I think really only art can, which is to say that both of these are a huge part of my heart and my life. And now I operate seamlessly between painting, robotics, AI. It's all part of the whole process that sort of not just led me here, but is like my daily engagement with material.
I love that because it's so apropos, because we are nose diving into the world that is AI, and we are going to have a relationship with us artists are going to have a relationship with AI, whether we like it or not. I think sometimes. So for you to kind of find a happy marriage between those two worlds with your journey sounds optimistic. I love hearing that. How long have you been How long have you been working in the industry now?
So I left Google in 2012. So
Mm,
we are 13 years on.
okay.
And there have been times where that felt really slow and really fast. Some of the recent success that I've had with the Whitney acquisition has really been game changing from, oh, I think I'm making this work. I'm on a good course to, I've now made it into an echelon of the certain type of success that really mattered to me setting out and get to be part of not just contemporary conversations about AI and portraiture and art, but to be thinking really historically about my work is now going to be preserved forever by a major museum. And so, how do I change what I'm doing to represent that history deeper and deeper?
Was there a moment I love hearing this. Was there a moment when you feel like there was that aha, that eureka of, I feel like I'm at the next level? Like, when did it feel like you were still, that struggling artist that was still, scrambling to get to the top of the peak? And when did you feel like you hit that peak? Was it with the acquisition of the pieces, or was it something before then maybe?
It was before then. I had spent about 3 years to develop the technology and concept with this new series, Facetune Portraits, which I know we'll get in. But I had had other series, I had had other milestones and markers of success. But I sort of disappeared from the art world for a little bit to really work on this series. And after I developed it, I just started hosting these virtual studio visits. And every single person was saying yes to me. Like,
Mm.
yes, I want you in Paris photo. Yes, I want to write about this work. Yes, come to
Hell
Berlin
yeah.
Art Week. And that
So what time was that? What year was that? Just to give us
that was
kind of a
about
timeline.
a year and a half ago. I started having studio visits, and I
So
say
like
virtual studio visits.
2023 ish,
Oh no, the
year and a half
beginning
ago.
of, gosh, we're in 2025. That's almost over, it turns out.
Yep,
It was
it flies by.
the beginning of 2024. I started to have something to show people. And it was a combination of the work was really there, and also what I had built was not just a new body of work, but relationships with people that I can even be having those studio visits with.
Sure.
And then even that whole strategy of, I'm going to ask people to spend 15 minutes with me on Zoom, have them meet my robots. It was a low enough bar
Yeah.
that almost everybody said yes to the meeting. And then everybody loved the work. And I think when a lot of artists are figuring out, okay, how do I make it? How do I make it work? How do I meet the right people? How do I make the right work? All of that takes so much creativity. And I think that system of asking people just to spend 15 minutes with an idea that I knew was fire was as important as the work itself.
So about 10 years. It took about a decade to get there.
Yeah, yeah, it did. And I mean, like, I look back, and like Google Photos or Apple does the like this year, 7 years ago. And it's always like me in the studio. And I'm just like, this work is so bad. Like, it's,
Oh man,
it,
aren't we're all our own worst critics, aren't we? God. But I from what I've seen, man, I was that's part of the reason I was so excited to talk with you today. It was I was really falling in love with a lot of your pieces. So let's switch gears. Let's start talking about first your process. I always like to talk process with artists first. Musicians, it's how they write a song, how they come up with their ideas. So as a painter, traditional painter, where do you start? What is it just the weirdest, craziest idea? Or is it something that, is something more subtle?
For me, it's a little bit more subtle.
Mm,
The and it is different in each series, but more recently, I had been personally thinking a lot about anytime there's pressure for us to be different than we are,
mm,
and how technology and AI expectations and algorithmic expectations are increasingly part of that conversation. And I was really grounding, and I think this is always true, and a couple different artists whose work I love. So for the Facetune portraits, so Frank Arbach and yeah, the way that Giacometti does his drawings, in those portraits, what we see is an instability of seeing. There isn't this fixed idea of the person. There's a vibration or almost a battle that is actually how we experience real people. There's so much in what has changed with technology and the screens and Instagram, where so often we're seeing people on this flat surface, but that's not how our eyes work. Our eyes are always seeing, because they're in two different places, slightly around objects. And so it was this congruence of me thinking about that from a technique perspective, and then me thinking about this question of how do I make a portrait that shows two different ways of seeing in one, specifically that evolve to how we actually are and how AI says we should be.
mm.
And that just went through, I mean, like I said, 2.5 years of technical and conceptual development.
So you raised a statement that I have to ask you about. What does what does AI say we should be then?
Yeah, and I think the first thing to really think about here is I think AI has an opinion on all of this. And how those opinions got developed have to do with how it was trained. But in the world that we live now, there are these algorithms that filter and change us. And they don't just change us as humans. Like every email is now being written the same, every website is now looking the same. And these filters sometimes are very explicit. They're used on social media. There's one on Zoom called Touch Up My Appearance. Each cell phone camera takes a different photo of us because all of these images are algorithmically processed and they're taught to prioritize different things. And so when we use a filter, a beauty filter, or Zoom Touch Up My Appearance, what it changes about us has a lot of value judgment in it. So with the Facetune app in particular, if you run that through an AI enhancement as a woman, it'll give you big lips and it'll give you big eyes and big boobs and a skinny waist.
I
The
get that too,
male
though. Sometimes, no, I'm kidding.
Yes, well the
I get that
man
sometimes.
version, the man version of it is all about the jaw right now. And
I have no jaw, never had one, so it helps.
well, you can now get one.
I
Did you
know.
know that?
So it is turning in us, all joking aside, into this kind of homogeneous entity. It wants us to all look the exact same. It sounds like.
Yes, and that compression of diversity into a single look is what's different about where we are within beauty standards today. Beauty standards have always existed. There's always been pressures to look a certain way, but never in history has there been a single international standard spreading at the speed of the way this opinion is being disseminated today. And that just makes us living in a very different time of the human image and portraiture.
Now, you're clearly getting into your Facetune portraits, and I definitely want to have a whole segment on that guy. But I want to build up to that. That's going to be kind of the heart of this piece is the Facetune portraits. So I have a lot to nerd out on there for sure. But first, just going back to process for a little bit. It sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like when something cultural or societal or something that is a juggernaut of ideas that gets a hold of you becomes maybe an internal struggle that you have to channel into your pieces. Does that where a lot of these things start? Am I translating that correctly?
Yes, I think maybe a more cohesive way I can say this is that technologies are increasingly powerful and increasingly opaque. AI is a huge example of that. The search engine was an example of that. The attention economy is an example of that. I'm always looking for things that seem very powerful and opaque and finding ways to unveil the surface, bring us in a playful and sometimes absurd way so that we, as the user, as the human, feel like we're not just more involved in the technology, but that we have more choice within it.
Sure. So you want to become the translator, it sounds like. How do I make this more easily consumable and understandable for the people that maybe don't understand and in an artistic way?
Right, because using art is really about creating a different doorway into that. AI is scary, algorithms are scary, search engines are scary, but if we make it something that people can relate to, that curiosity becomes empowering.
This is fascinating. Is it always tech? Like I feel like you a lot of your genesis points are with technology. Do you ever want to just, paint a bowl of fruit?
Well, in what I do on my days off, yes, I mean I'm here in Park City, Utah right now. I paint the mountains, I paint the flowers. That's part of my practice of staying really in touch with paint and ways of seeing. Those are for me. Some of my neighbors, but they're almost like the warm up before the race.
Ah, oh, I like that. Okay. So is there something is all of this rooted into something like did you have nightmares watching The Terminator as a kid? What why always focus on this world or is it just because it is so apropos that we are a million, light speed in this one direction and it's crazy scary how fast we're getting to this world and how fast it'll inevitably change us and everything around us.
Yeah, I'm gonna call Y2K as the genesis moment on this
Oh, okay.
because I mean, I was a kid and nobody understood what was going on. Everyone was afraid of technology. Everyone was trying to figure out should they be afraid of technology? When nothing happened at Y2K,
It was nothing. It was a blip.
nothing.
It wasn't even a flicker of lights. Nothing.
Just literally nothing happened. And I think it was the last cultural moment in which we were able to create any social fear and curiosity about the direction of technology. And it was a red herring. I think about that moment as like being a kid and being like, oh my God, I've just, stocked some canned goods in the basement. And, I was
Got your
like,
sleeping bag ready and your
yeah, exactly. And I was like an early prepper. So I think part of me wanted it to happen. I was 11, 12, however old I was at this point.
That is so funny. So yeah, let's dig into your pieces a little more. And our team did some research on your case, and it was fascinating to learn about the internet vision boards. Like, I want to start there. Your quote is reclaiming technology as an artistic medium. Tell us about that.
So I was making these classical paintings in my mentor's studio, and I was making copies of his paintings. That's how I was learning. And I put them on my website, and I said, these are after Billy Childish paintings. They're based on Billy Childish paintings. I'm learning from Billy Childish paintings. And the internet started to pick up my terrible copies as search results. And he's a famous artist. Like, this is like, and it started to happen very subtly. And I thought, oh my God, is this interesting? And as you know, I'm this sort of nascent technologist. I'd been playing around with other things. I had gone to school for this. I had worked at Google. And so I started saying, what is happening here? And what was happening is there is this big gap between how we experience the world as humans and how the search engine processes information. The search engine, Google, and to some extent AI now, only dealt in relevance. So all the internet knew is that I was relevant to Billy Childish paintings. There
Hmm.
was no hope, fear, desire. And I realized that if I tell you, Novo, that someday I want to have my artwork on the cover of Art Forum, but you know that right now I'm talking about a hope that has not happened. Right, but I realized that Google was only going to build relevance between me and the cover of Art Forum. So this whole series became about things that I want in my life manifested through Google search results. So I did these art world institution hacks, the Turner Prize, the Whitney Biennial, the cover of Art Forum. When you Google these things, my vision boards about wanting those things came up before all of the real search results in a way that
Hmm.
as people we could totally see this was a it was a hand-drawn art forum cover with a bunch of flowers and glitter pasted all over it, but it was manipulating the internet. It was not only just manipulating the internet, it was teaching AI that this is what the cover of Art Forum now looks like. And that just became my entry point into hacking into the art world. The art world loves an institutional critique. It loves a critique of power. And I was showing that I could become more relevant than the real thing.
How's it going so far?
Well, I mean, the funniest thing is that I said I was going to manifest and hack my way into the art world. And the year I've just had with the Whitney and Paris Photo and Expo Chicago, these are all major art world institutions. But that professed goal of I'm going to use technology as a tool of transformation, I'm going to use technology for what I see as good ends, and I am going to use technology to not just build an art practice, but build a life that did not exist before really fulfills the initial prompt that I gave myself when I left tech.
Hmm. Wow. Okay. And from there, I was fascinated to learn about what you call your affirmation ads and glitch gifts, especially the thirst trap glitch gifts. A lot of fun. Those no. So I got to ask you, Miss Andrew, uh, the thirst trap glitch gifts are exactly what they sound like, right? That was very self-explanatory. As soon as I saw it, I'm like, okay, I get this. Now the affirmation ads for the good people out there listening. Tell them what that is. That was a little hard, a little more challenging to understand.
So, this was a small series I did after the vision boards, where it was a series of vision board like paintings that had an affirmation on it like, I am beautiful. And you could go to the gallery in Cologne and go around the gallery and say, this one's my favorite affirmation. This painting of I am beautiful is my favorite one. And how it worked on the technical side is I basically had you add it to your e-commerce cart by saying, I select this painting. And then I use the Facebook tracking pixel and other forms of retargeting so that that painting that you picked followed you around the internet. Like, when you try, like, you go to buy shoes, you add it to your cart, and then you forget about it for a couple days. Those shoes follow you everywhere. They're on Instagram, they're on Google, they're on the top of the New York Times.
They
I
haunt
use
us,
that
yes.
same they haunt us. But I said, "Okay, well, why don't you install a painting of your choice in your digital life? Let's use that same technology, and that space that's normally reserved for advertising is now a message that you selected that tells you you do not need anything." And it uses that same e-commerce technology, but to remind you that you already have everything you need.
And then what led to the glitch gifts?
With Thirst Trap Glitch Gifts, I was
A lot of
thinking
fun.
about
Loved them, by
they're
the way.
so fun, they're so good. I loved making them. I was thinking about how to use attention against itself, especially being a woman in the art world. And, I think when like in maybe in my early 20s, I thought like, oh, this sexual attention, this negative attention, I can convert this into a career somehow. I can like sit through this meeting, I can deal with this harassment because I still have attention on me. And maybe I can, because there's attention on me, maybe I can somehow use that to talk about my art. That never works. and but I was thinking about how technology could actually make this work. And so the way it works is that the very first slide of the GIF is a photo that I wanted to come up as a top search result in part of my search engine manipulation. So let's say, for example, I was working on like tricking Google into thinking that my artwork was already on the cover of Art Forum. So I would make that first slide of the GIF a the image that I wanted to come up in Google, my artwork on the cover of Art Forum. But I knew that in Google search results, it wasn't going to show the animation. It was only going to show that one slide of the 200. And then the next 199 are me being sexy. And so while people were watching these,
Okay.
while people were watching these, you would just see this little bit of a glitch. But that glitch is all Google saw. And by
Hmm.
putting your attention on the whole animation, it was like, oh, people, Google's like, this, people love this image. Like, we need to surface this higher and higher. We need to, this is the most engaging and relevant image that we have for the cover of Art Forum. And it really showed, again, that gap between what we were seeing and experiencing as people and Google not literally not reading the whole story.
So, what is the whole story?
The whole story is that it's all more complicated and nuanced than technology is ever going to let us express through it.
So, we only see a snapshot of what the reality is.
Yeah, we as people see a lot more of it. But what we're presented with online, whether it's through Google image search or through the news or through the images we see on social media of other people, it's not the whole human story. It's the story that can be compressed into the form that the internet and social media are giving us to work with.
And with every conclusion is sometimes a new beginning, which leads us perfectly into, guys, what you've all been waiting for Facetune portraits. Let me give the good people a primer. Okay, I like to do that for, we're looking at you, Riles, for all the people that aren't the biggest art buffs. So Facetune portraits, she's talked about this a little bit, but just to put it into one sentence, Facetune portraits use custom robotics to physically paint popular beautifying AI-driven filters into oil paintings. How'd you come up with this?
Within the history of art, there's the history of portraiture. And at every time, what the portraits were like represented what that society valued. Famously, Oliver Cromwell, when he became the Lord Protector, wanted his portrait to be painted with all of the warts
Hmm.
because he wanted to show people that he was different than his predecessors, that he was straightforward and pure and honest and not glitzy and glamoury. This is just one example of using how we represent ourselves to say something about who we are. With Facetune portraits, I wanted to look at what's happening with AI's impact on our beauty standards and our expectations of ourselves as more and more people are using filters and Facetune and modifications that, like, let's be honest, like, we do not look like that. It's just but we're seeing so many people every day that supposedly look like that. It's something that is huge and also really impacting not just our expectations as adults, but youth perception. And I think it says a lot about our insecurities as a culture. So, one of the things that these Facetune filters and apps do is it makes us all look the same. So, I teach in China, and my students out there have been for years just saying, well, yeah, of course we use these filters. Of course we don't mind looking like everybody else. You know, I when I lived in Tokyo, I would go out on Halloween and 40 friends would all be dressed up as the exact same in the exact same costume. And there's a very different collectivist relationship in parts of the East and the hyper individualism of the West. We're generalizing here. But what I'm seeing happening in the West is a fear of individuality and a desire not just to be accepted as beautiful, but to be accepted by the algorithm and sacrificing individuality to to look like everybody else because that feels safer. And I do think that's a bit of a change in our culture. Celebrities are all getting the same plastic surgeries now and are looking more and more similar. So it's not just like a teenage girl on TikTok or like a 60-year-old guy on Zoom conversation. Our actual preeminent public figures are merging more and more into this ideal that is an internationally expressed standard of beauty.
So how do we fight it? How do we how do we embrace that individuality?
Yeah, so like really what I'm trying to do in the work of Facetune Portraits is raise awareness of these invisible scars. That when we do use these filters, there is a cost to it. And what is that cost? The cost is individuality, the cost is diversity, the cost is I think honestly being able to feel confident in our actual physical bodies. If
Mm.
we're physically looking one way and constantly putting out images into the world, whether it's again on a Zoom meeting through a Zoom filter or on Instagram or on a dating app, and we know that we've made these modifications, how does that make us feel when we are in the world? I don't think it makes us feel more confident.
I agree. But beauty, culturally speaking, this is a very American problem, and it's not necessarily new. So, do you feel like AI has exacerbated the problem, or and is going to make it exponentially worse, or is it maybe it was an inevitable evolution?
AI is absolutely exacerbating the problem. The scale and the speed at which this single standard is spreading internationally is unlike anything we've ever seen before. People are going into plastic surgeons with these apps and their face tuned
And they're
images and
saying,
saying,
"Make me look like this."
make me look like this.
Oh,
And that image that comes out of that is prioritized for the still flat image. It's not the lips that we see are meant to be viewed from the front and not the side. That's the whole duck lip thing.
yeah.
But it's more important to us that we look a certain way from the front because that's how we're seen on a screen. That we sort of forget that, like, yeah, in the real world, people see us from all sorts of angles.
And it becomes, like tattoos or something. It clearly becomes an addiction where one plastic surgery leads to another and to another to another. And before we and they know it, they don't look human anymore. To me, they look kind of monstrous, almost, unhuman, if you will. That kind of addiction is scary. But just to hear that it's turning into like a epidemic, cultural epidemic proportions is yeah, that's very scary.
I'm glad that you brought up this idea of the monstrousness
Oh, it's
because
monstrousness. Oh my god, yes.
the monstrousness.
Yeah, it's awful.
In my opinion, often what the face ends up looking like, or the face and body end up looking like when a woman or a man is stuck in this process, is it, do you know of the uncanny valley?
Of course. Oh yeah. We talk about it a lot
So
on the show.
great. So your listeners, most of them probably know the uncanny valley is this uncomfortableness that we have when robots and artificial intelligences look like human, but not quite like human.
Right, and that's the valley. It's just this eerie horror element where they're trying so hard to be human, but it just creeps us the hell out.
So I think what's happening is we're meeting those robots halfway, and we're starting to look like people that have been AI generated, but are just failing a little bit to be human, or
Hmm.
just failing a little bit to be perfectly AI. And so we've started to cross this chasm literally from the other direction, taking these AI driven beauty standards and changing our faces and bodies. And I think it's only going to get weirder.
It's only gonna get weirder. God. Let's leave that conversation there and move on to something I've been wanting to talk to you about. So specifically the Miss Universe series, because the Universal Beauty series that uses the Facetune portraits. Was there, just for the record, just for really me, honestly? So everyone, stop listening for a second. Was there a regular like Facetune portraits of just like regular Joes and Janes, and then there was like a series of just those people, and then the Miss Universe series?
So there are a variety of subjects.
Okay,
I've done a selfie series, I've done a series of ballerinas that's still evolving, and I worked with some influencers in Berlin
yeah,
to take the initial portrait and to have a conversation with them as I was doing their Facetune portrait about those algorithmic pressures and about the desire to have a platform and to speak about travel or politics. Like all these influencers are creating content or selling something other than their faces and bodies. But the need to show their faces and bodies in a particular way to even develop that platform is this dance with the devil that all of them were in and felt a lot of pressure to conform to. So that became one of the first parts of this before I even did the Miss Universes.
Hmm. So I have to ask, okay, again, this is mainly for me because I was thinking when I was looking at your pieces, and again, I love the pieces. I'm so glad it is winning awards. They're excellent. They're breathtaking. Guys, check them out.
Thank you.
But when I was looking at the Miss Universe pieces, I was thinking there's got to be a deeper metaphorical meaning here because I was like, okay, she's using people that are already unrealistically very beautiful. Like we're already starting with a woman that's so beautiful, like 1% of the population. They won the genetics lottery, guys. And there's no way in hell, even with plastic surgery, I could get there. And then I was thinking, so we're already starting there, but then we're enhancing them more with AI. Is there something to be said with already starting like your foundational subject as something that is unconventionally or unreal already sets an unrealistic beauty standard?
Absolutely. Starting with the Miss Universes was a firm statement to say nobody is safe from these expectations and you're never going to be good enough for them. It doesn't matter if you're a celebrity, if you're a Miss Universe. It's it's absurd. Even like you can facetune a Miss Universe contestant once and then take that same image and put it back into Facetune and it will keep going and keep going, and the only time it stops is when it's distorted the face and the body so much that it can no longer recognize the face as a face. That's the only time it ends.
Hmm. Okay. And I noticed this has to feed well into your recent group exhibition that was entitled Body Anxiety in the Age of AI. How was that experience?
Yeah, so there are a bunch of other artists and curators, Annika Meyer being one of the core ones, who have been thinking about the way that not just AI, but before AI, social media is impacting the way that we see each other, but more importantly, how we see ourselves. And there's been some research done by the British Psychology Society on how when we use these apps on ourselves, it's more damaging than when we see other people who have used these apps. Like seeing
Hmm.
ourselves go through this transformation is very unsettling, very disruptive to our expectations of ourselves. And that's really was at the core of that exhibition that took place at the House of Electronic Arts in Switzerland.
That begs the question, I think it sounds like, and you don't have to tell this on air. I'm just going to guess based on your Y2K comment that we're about the same age. And so because since I grew up in kind of this half of my life was in analog and then the other half was in digital, and now we're kind of getting into I feel bad for the generation that one only grew up with digital and Facebook and all of these things that are just making them more depressed and creating body anxieties. But now that we are living in the world of AI, what do we have any hope for, what is the current generation? Gen Alpha, Gen Beta? Like, is it just going to be this new set of problems that we can't even anticipate with that generation?
We were talking a bit before about how there've always been beauty standards. One of the
Yeah,
things that's happening now
but never
is
this
that
stuff.
well, because like when I grew up, and yeah, I'm 37, when I grew up, it was like,
I'll
oh,
bleep
these
that. Don't
celebrities
worry.
on the on yes, I'm glad this isn't on video. But the women on the glossy magazines, it was like, oh, the beauty standards are impossible. But now they're actually impossible. We are regularly looking at
Well,
faces
there
and
was
bodies.
Photoshop. I feel like it was impossible back then too.
Sure, there was Photoshop, but not at the mass scale of Instagram and there's been a democratization of that tool
I feel
through this
like isn't the
automation.
biggest difference that there's a beckoning, like you still had to actively go buy the magazines or have the television on, with like Instagram and Twitter and all the social media that has been, you know, relatively net negative for a lot of generations, especially with this kind of stuff. It's the fact that it's not only the algorithm stuff, but it's the notifications. It's the facts that they're immersed in it and they can't hide from it at all.
And I think it's very difficult to justify opting out of it entirely. But it's so pervasive and so prevalent
Yeah.
that I think parents are really stuck with a conversation of how do we let our kids relate to technology that is in a constant evolution that we don't have all the information about negative mental health impact on. I mean, as someone who's using it all the time, I do think social media is going to be the tobacco of our generation, that all of this research is probably
Heroin of
somewhere.
our
Right.
generation.
Yeah, it's true. Like it's but I think that the institutional scandal around it is why I'm bringing up tobacco, because I think these companies know.
Oh, they definitely know. Oh, 100%.
And we sort of know, but we're still, it's like the Surgeon General just gave social media a warning, right, a couple of years ago. And it's sort of, I don't know, it's easy to sort of think that's kind of funny, but it's like it's that bad.
What would you tell the parents? Would you say, I've heard people say, oh, don't let them have social media until they're 18 or 16, 18, 21, until like they're a little more formed, like psychologically speaking, to understand that this isn't real, or that there's a difference here, and that, do our best to not let uh, the algos and the AI and everything consume the human.
Well, as someone without kids, I love giving parenting advice, so thank you so much for the
Well,
opportunity.
this is like societal advice,
Yeah,
cultural
so it's just funny.
advice.
I always joke with my friends that it's like, yeah, I've got an opinion on all of that. I think there is something very real about the brain formation that does probably give us some information about a point in which this is probably less damaging. And I think that's important information to consider as a parent. But I do think that, like, you lock down your child's own phone, but it's not like they're not going to see it. So having that education be very early, probably earlier than parents think. Like, you might think,
Mm.
oh, my kid doesn't have a cell phone, so I don't need to have this conversation yet. But there's a good chance that they've seen that somewhere else on somebody else's cell phone, or YouTube. It's
And then it creates like FOMO, and then there's weird struggles of, oh well, if they can't have the phone, then they're ostracized, they're excluded, and it's like a catch 22. It sounds like for a lot of these generations.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, what about like going back to like a real dumb phone, one where you just can
Oh,
text your
flip,
friends?
yeah,
Yeah, like
let's
I
do
think
it.
that's a cool idea. Not to be like, well, the way I grew up is the best way. You
Back
got
in
to
my
print your
day.
you got to print your MapQuest directions. Like you,
Oh, I loved it. Yeah. No, I had a flip phone, no joke, until 2013. Everybody made fun of me, and I loved that thing, and I
wow,
kind
I
of
had a
miss it now.
BlackBerry in college. Like, it was,
Oh man,
but also I was a tech nerd.
big
You have
deal
to
over
like
here.
give me like a little a little bit of leeway with that. But yeah, I think setting like good boundaries with technology are important for adults as well.
Do you think we'll get there with legislation though? Because like we've done shows on this where it's like, I think AI can be great as a tool, and not necessarily a crutch or let it consume us. But we have to have like guardrails, legislation on how it's used, how it affects us, all these things. And that, of course, will play into the individual. And of course, again, circling back to creating different anxieties, including body anxiety.
I think legislation's important. I think being in a tech industry where there isn't such monopoly power so that there are more options, because this isn't like we tend to like be like, oh, this is social media. I guess that's the only way it can ever be. But that's sort of the world we've come into with the amount of concentrated power and advertising power and network effects that we do have through these platforms. So I think, the breaking up the monopolies, which will never happen, is one of the areas of potential hope.
We should end it with that. Break up the monopolies, people. Before we move on, I want to ask something fun, and that is this: Do you build your own robots?
I did originally. Actually, I worked with one of my students at the Creative Computing Institute to build a robotic design that could be reproduced by anyone for a couple $100s. And it's an absolute game changer for accessibility within robotics. And so this was sponsored by the Knight Foundation and the Mud Foundation, who really allowed us to take the time and resource to make basically an IKEA style guide that we
Oh.
can teach and have people follow. It's not seamless, but it is way easier and way more accessible than spending a couple $1,000s or more on a robot.
So what's the future hold then? Is it we're going to push further into technology, more robotics, more AI, more pieces that are kind of mirroring our anxieties, or are we going to go completely different directions and I finally get to see some of those mountain vistas?
Well, I'm going to spend, it's almost ski season here in Utah, so I'm going to ski every day
Let's
from 9 to 10
go.
a.m.
Yeah.
While I'm experiencing the mountains physically. The work is going to stay in the same technical and conceptual area, but I'm going to be looking at algorithms that make us look younger, youthifying algorithms. And then this terrifying, are you ready for this?
Ready.
Have you heard of nudify algorithms?
I have. Oh, it's kind of scary tech.
Yeah, it undresses you. The algorithm takes off your clothes and allows you to make a deep fake nude of
Oh,
anybody.
that's bad. That is bad business. Oh, I'm scared.
And so the thing about this though, like it put through my same process where we start with a clothed painting. When
Yeah.
the robot comes in to undress you, we're not getting that photographic, pornographic image. We're getting a painted nude,
Mm,
which allows us to have this conversation without actually having to put more of that imagery into the world. And
yeah.
I do think like, yeah, I mean, like, don't listen to this and use those apps Gen Alpha, but also like be aware that those are out there.
Quit it.
And like, and also you might like the images that you're looking at or could potentially be looking at might not be real.
Yeah.
And I think that is a really dark conversation that we do need to have.
I'm excited. You'll have to be on the show for round 2, and we're gonna hear about
Oh, thank you.
the the nudifying and youngifying apps and the pieces that mirror those things. So let's have a lightning round. Just some quick, off the cuff. First thing that pops in your head. Do you still run at least a mile every day?
Yes.
Oh wow. How do you have the time for that?
Well, sometimes it's just a mile. So what you're referring to is I've run at least 1 mile every day since 2007, and sometimes it's on an airport concourse, and sometimes it's in some weird shoes, and sometimes I've had a little bit too much champagne. But it's the one consistent thing that travels with me, and I'm trying to make it to 30 years and then take a day off. That's the goal. So we're about 17 years in.
What's the motivation? What are you running from or towards?
I read an article in 2007 or 2006 that talked about how the this person in this New York Times article did this, and he was saying that he ran almost every day and he was sick of asking himself the question, am I going to run today? So he decided to make it like brushing his teeth, that like yes, you just do it every day. And there have been some times where I've been like had a big fever, I've been really sick, where it's been terrible. But in 17 years or however long it's been, there are only maybe a handful of times where I didn't feel better after I had done it. And that just sort of like get outside, get a little sweaty. It's one of the most life-giving moments of my day.
And last but not least, before we wrap this thing up, are you as divided as the rest of the audience on Taylor Swift's new album, The Life of a Showgirl?
Oh my god, I'm not divided. I love it. I'm
Oh,
obsessed.
man. Okay. I read that you're
Yeah,
an eensy weensy bit of a Swiftie, so I thought I'd add a Swiftie question in here for you.
I'm a big Swiftie, and the one thing I've learned about being a Swiftie is that the music grows on you. It is often a form of art that I really admire, where it can seem very innocuous and it's insidious in a powerful and a good way. And I'm very curious about just the joy that's in this album because it is different, and I'm having a great time with it. So thank you for asking. I love it. Father Figure is so good.
Guys, you heard it here first. It's a gem. Check it out. So let's give the good people a way to connect with you. So, tell the good people what is the best way to connect with you, purchase your work, or maybe just exhibit your work? Maybe an art dealer is listening right now. So, what's the best way for people to do that?
Yeah, I would go to my website, which is gretchenandrew.com. And if you sign up to my newsletter there and you do want to come to some fun art world events, we'd love to have you and get to show you some of this work. And really, why I'm so excited to be on this podcast is I've really wanted to take this conversation outside of the art world or outside of just that traditional art world and really hear what people think, because I think that's only going to make it better. So please do get in touch. I'd love to have this conversation with you.
Guys, check her out at Gretchen Andrew. Gretchen, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an amazing talk.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a really great conversation, and thank you for taking me back through the journey of all of this work. It was fun to revisit.
Oh, we love to give history lessons on Art of the Beholder. So thank you again so much. It was a lot of fun. Guys, thank you so much for listening. Again, if you want to check out Miss Gretchen Andrew, you can do so at her website, gretchenandrew.com. That's GretchenAndrew.com. Again, that is GretchenAndrew.com. And if you like that, you can always check us out at novodayproductions.com. You can always follow us at _Novo_day and at AOTB podcast and at AOTB.podcast. One has a dot, one doesn't. Don't forget to like, subscribe, do all the things. You know what to do. It's internet etiquette. Who cares? And if you'd like to sponsor our little love child or be on the show, please reach out to us at novodayproductions@gmail.com. So until next time, you know what to do. Be good to each other, and as always, good luck and Godspeed. We love you.
Art of the Beholder is brought to you by Novo Day Productions. Created by Novo Day and Theodore T. Buckingham. Written, directed, produced, and edited by Novo Day and the NDP Collective. Starring Philip Church of philipchurch.com. That's Philip with one L. Alexandra Parsons of alexandraparsons.com. ALEXANDRA-PARSONS.com. With special contributions by Theodore T. Buckingham. Music by A Company, Instagram handle A_CO_music_. Logo design by Tom Justice of thejusticecompany.com, JESTUS. Thank you again for listening. All rights reserved.